Greetings, loyal subjects. In this episode of History with Henry, we are going to bust 7 myths about Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was the second of my 6 wives. She was executed on Tower Green, with the executioner of Calais removing her head with a sword. She was executed on charges of treason, adultery, and incest. But not, as many people think, witchcraft. Yes, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have spied Anne Boleyn's portrait on the walls of Hogwarts. But that does not mean that she was a witch. I just happened to say in casual conversation, in one of my more angry of moments, words to the effect that Anne Boleyn bewitched me. But that doesn't mean that she was charged with the crime of witchcraft. So myth number 1, busted. And it kind of leads us on to myth number 2, that Anne Boleyn had 6 fingers on one hand. Absolutely no contemporary evidence to support this fact whatsoever. The Spanish ambassador, a man that absolutely hated Anne Boleyn, he was called Chapuis, he used to write letters back to the King of Spain. He would never actually refer to her by her name. He would refer to her normally as the concubine. Trust me, if she had had 6 fingers on her hand, Chapuis would have written to the King of Spain about it. In addition, when workmen discovered the bodies of my queens in the church in the tower, they didn't report that either of the bodies had an extra digit on their hand. Absolutely no truth to the great myth that Anne Boleyn had 6 fingers. It is all related to that fake charge of witchcraft. The next great myth was that Anne Boleyn was some kind of great beauty. She wasn't. In fact, you today have very little idea of what Anne Boleyn looked like, because after her fall and her execution, all of the portraits of her were destroyed. In fact, the reports we do have about her appearance from the various ambassadors at my court were none too complimentary. Anne Boleyn intrigued me by the sheer force of her personality. Myth number 4, Anne Boleyn miscarried a deformed child. Yes, Anne Boleyn had a number of miscarriages during our marriage. This particular miscarriage was the final one. The one that actually happened on the same day of Catherine of Aragon's funeral. Once again, the roots of this myth go back to the idea that Anne Boleyn was charged with witchcraft. The idea that a witch would give birth to some kind of monster. There are many crazy stories and reports going round that the baby she miscarried had no bones in its body. Again, there is no contemporary evidence of any of this anywhere. Myth number 5. Anne Boleyn was actually my own daughter. Sounds crazy, but the idea was that when I was a very young man, I actually had an affair with Anne Boleyn's mother, Elizabeth Howard. The reason why this particular myth gained a little bit of credibility was that Elizabeth Howard did have quite a reputation at court, shall we say. However, I actually confirmed verbally that I had never had any relations with Anne Boleyn's mother. When I was trying to get a dispensation from the Pope in order to marry Anne, I had to declare that I had had a relationship with her sister, Mary Boleyn. And I was asked at that time if I'd ever had a relationship with Elizabeth Howard, who was now Elizabeth Boleyn. And I declared no, never, the mother. Oh, and I would have had to have been between about 12 and 15 at the time anyway. The 6th myth. Anne Boleyn was a poisoner. Anne in moments of anger and frustration, did make several rash statements. She wished both Catherine of Aragon and my daughter with Catherine, Mary, dead. The kind of thing we all say in the heat of the moment. But when my first wife, Catherine of Aragon, actually died, they opened up her body to prepare for embalming for the funeral. And they found that her heart was pure black. And that led to rumours that she had actually been poisoned. Your clever modern doctors today think that actually Catherine of Aragon died of some form of cancer of the heart. But back in my day, people believed she'd been poisoned. A few months after her execution, my own illegitimate son, Henry VIII, a young man that Anne Boleyn resented and hated because she believed that he was a threat to Elizabeth, mysteriously died. And that led to rumours around courts that Anne Boleyn was coming back from the dead, poisoning people. Completely and utterly untrue. There are no such things as ghosts, after all. It is more than likely that Henry VIII died from a disease such as tuberculosis. Interestingly, he, my elder brother Arthur, and my other son Edward all died about the same age from very similar conditions. And the final Anne Boleyn myth busted. That she was guilty of the charges of adultery, that she was actually guilty of the charges of adultery that had been put against her. In the Tudor court, kings, queens, important people were hardly ever alone. It would have been practically impossible for Anne Boleyn to have committed adultery with 5 different men without people being aware. The idea of incest is also somewhat ropey. Tudor England was a very religious place. Incest was seen as a great sin. There is no way that Anne Boleyn would have put her eternal soul at risk for such a relationship. As well as the sheer impracticality and ludicrous of the scale of the charges, clever historians have determined that when Anne Boleyn was decreed as committing adultery, she was at a different place from the gentleman in question. Or she was spending time with me. Anne was put to death on false charges. I hope you enjoyed today's video where we busted some facts about my second wife Anne Boleyn. Join me next time for History with Henry.